Finding things in life that fulfill you and compel you and entertain you and pique your curiosity. Those are really important when we're, battling our way through what is often a very difficult career.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget that CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMFI in the show notes to learn how. My guest today is, in her own words, a recovering emergency medicine physician, as well as a very successful author of medical fiction. She also teaches narrative medicine in a local medical school, and she is a passionate supporter of public libraries. So let's hear my conversation with Dr. Kimmery Martin. I am really looking forward to my conversation today with Dr. Kimmery Martin, who has quite a story to tell in her segue from physician to highly sought-after author and novelist. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, Kimmery, thank you very much for joining us today on Prescriptions for Success. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as we always do, we want to begin at the beginning and explore your career path a bit. As I understand it, you grew up in Kentucky, is that correct?
Yes, I did. I grew up in rural eastern Kentucky, about 15 minutes outside of a little town called Berea.
If that's the closest community, it was a bit rural, I guess. And tell me about your early life. Was anyone in your family connected in any way with the medical world, or were you the first?
I was pretty much the first. I did have a grandfather who was a dentist, but he died before I was born, and really the only thing I knew about him was that he was a huge practical joker. Apparently he kept he made himself an absolutely appalling set of false teeth, just, gnarly and brown and crooked, and wore them when he met patients.
Sounds like an entertaining guy. Without any influence from the family, where did your interest in medicine come from?
Oh, that is a really good question, because I am definitely one of those people who could have gone a lot of different directions. And obviously I have. On career number 4. I started getting interested in medicine really during my junior year of college. So I was not pre-med prior to that. I was doing a thesis on coping mechanisms of children who were critically ill. And so I was spending some time in a pediatric hospital for that reason, and just found myself really interested in the sciencey side of medicine, more so than the psychological side, actually. And so I crammed up and took all the pre-med requirements that I was missing, and took the MCAT and wound up going to medical school.
So when you actually started undergraduate school, which was University of Louisville, is that correct?
That's right.
In that freshman year, was everything up for grabs, or did you have any kind of an idea about where you were going to be headed?
No, I really didn't. I was a psychology major by default. It seemed like an interesting subject. But I do really like science. I really loved chemistry, really loved biology. I loved to read, but I liked the humanities too. I did not know what I wanted to do. And it kind of seems like a shame to me that My children are, pigeonholed so young. They really almost have to focus during high school on a certain career path. Sometimes some colleges make you declare a major before you enter. And I kind of hate that because I like the idea of being a Renaissance man in a little bit of the way. And I think a lot of physicians are that way because we are inherently curious people. We like learning. We like finding out things.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that, and it's really an unfortunate thing, but kids really do. By the time they're like in 6th or 7th grade, people are telling them they got to prepare and they got to be ready and they got to think about where they're going. Do you think we ought to take some steps to change that?
I do. I like the idea of a broad general education and the chance to explore different fields, especially if you're going to devote the entirety of your professional life to one subject. College really is your main chance to learn other things. So, I would, if I were on admissions committees for medical school, I wouldn't have any problem admitting people who were humanities majors or language majors or political science majors or anything.
Yeah, it's funny, and I don't know if anything has changed. Obviously, I applied to medical school at about the time they invented fire, but we were told, even back in those dark days, that they wanted us to have a broad liberal arts education, but yet they said, but you probably ought to major in one of the sciences, which is kind of antithetical to what I think that we should be thinking about. And it sounds like you had somewhat the same experience. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, well, to some extent, yes. But I think about it now, and I teach these narrative medicine classes for medical students. And I think about it now, and some of the skills that are the most important to our profession are communication skills, critical thinking skills, writing skills even sometimes. So it's not a useless background to have studied something else, I think.
And you were at about what point in your undergrad education when you decided you were going to apply to medical school?
I was a junior.
And what was you were a Magna graduate, for crying out loud. You couldn't have had a substantial amount of trouble getting accepted. Am I reading that correctly?
Well, if you're calling me a nerd, you're right. I like school.
There's nothing nerdy about it at all. In fact, I think everybody that I have really enjoyed associating with throughout my life have been curious people and people that had a lot of knowledge. But it is a fact, and again, harking back to what we spoke about before, even though we're told that admissions committees are looking for a very broad-based education, it seems that they expect us to spend a good bit of time in the sciences, and so you kind of got to do that.
Yeah, of course. And science is fascinating. I mean, where would we be as human beings without it?
Of course. So it sounds like it was a little bit of a roll of the dice here. I don't hear that that burning desire of I've wanted to be a physician since the day I was born or anything like that. So having deferred that decision until well into your college years, when you got to medical school, what was your first impression? Did you feel like you'd landed in the right place, or was there any doubt at that point?
Oh, 100%. I loved it.
Right from the start, right in the basic sciences.
Right from the beginning. And part of it was academic, part of it was social. It was a really formative period in my life. I made the closest friendships of my life. I'm still really good friends with 6 other women from my medical school class. We go on trips together every year. We text almost every day. And we had such a good time in medical school. And I loved the subjects. I loved our attendings. I loved the patients. Just the whole experience was every single day a almost transformative new thing that I didn't know before. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad to hear that. I don't hear that a lot. I hear a lot of stories of, wow, I didn't know if I was going to survive the basic science or not, and I got into clinicals and everything was fine and that sort of thing. But for you, it sounds like it was a very enjoyable ride all the way, and I congratulate you on that.
Are you a doctor struggling to provide the best care for your patients while dealing with financial and caregiving matters out of the scope of your practice? Do you find yourself scrambling to keep up with the latest resources and wish there was an easier way? Then this virtual caregiver conference resource will save you time, money, and sanity by giving you all the resources and information your patients need in one place. This conference helps you and your patients enlist the best strategies around healthcare resources and the best financial steps for your patients while navigating caregiving situations. You don't have to go home feeling frustrated and helpless because you couldn't connect your patients with the best services. Find out more at jeanniedoherty.com or click in the link in the show's notes. You don't want to miss this caregiver resource.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but first, I'd like to share a message from Navigate. After spending years in the financial sector, Navigate has met lots of clients with all kinds of student loan issues. They were confused, they were overwhelmed by the doublespeak and the overly complex forms, and especially the deliberately misleading statements from loan servicer representatives. Navigate recognized the chaos in the student loan industry and immediately brought clarity and real solutions. If you'd like to flip the script on student debt, visit www.flipthescript.loan/MD-coaches to schedule a call with Navigate. They'll tailor a plan specifically for your unique situation and work with you until the loan is paid off. What do you have to lose besides the stress of student loan debt?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests. Whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics, Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. Well, this will be a good way for us to segue into the later evolution of your career. And that is to say, did you find private practice really, really rewarding, and you loved every day that you spent and couldn't wait to show up to work? Or were there early doubts or perhaps maybe later doubts that led you to make this transition into becoming a writer of fiction. I'm really interested to know. I mean, it sounds like such an unusual career change. Although even though, well, when you became an author, you decided to write about the things that you had lived. But what was it like? How did you come to that decision that you were going to leave something that you had really done some grueling training and spent literally the best part of your life, best years of your life, learning how to do something? That's a really interesting thing. I wonder how many novelists have that consideration of should I even be thinking about this if I have children? But tell us what it was like for you.
I wish I could tell you what it was like to write a novel, work full-time in the emergency department, and have toddlers. I cannot, because clearly that fried my brain to the point where I don't remember. I really don't. Like, I look back on that period now and I remember things in, bits and flashes, but I don't really remember the day-to-day grind of writing the novel because, I was just tired.
Sure.
I remember telling my husband that I was going to write a novel, and he sort of laughed and made a dubious comment, but I did do it. I finished it, and it was absolute crap. It was so bad.
And this is while you were still practicing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I had this idea that I was going to write about a group of medical school friends, because I remember I mentioned before in my own life that was such a formative period. It was so intense and so joyous and so poignant and so terrifying and, all the feels. So I thought, all right, I'm going to write about this group of friends in medical school. And now that I know more about literature and producing it, I realize that's not a plot. Those are characters. So I had to go back and revise and revise and revise. I had to get educated on how you write novels. I had to get educated on how you get published. And it took a really long time. You have to get a literary agent to represent you. And that was a whole process. It was all very humbling. But the upshot of it is that ultimately, after several years, probably 5 years, all told, I had a wonderful literary agent and I was picked up by Penguin Random House. And so at that point, I kind of had to make a decision because I was just flat out of time, to make time to write the novel. I gave up watching television completely, but I personally could not work full time, take care of young children and write full time. So I wound up cutting back my hours quite a lot in the emergency department. And then I got offered the world's best job. So I live in Charlotte, which is a very financial city. The downtown is all banks and financial centers and trading centers and so forth. And so they had an allergy clinic in one of the high rises, and they wanted an ER doctor on site in case anyone had an anaphylactic reaction to a shot. And they told me, this will be a boring job. You'll be sitting in a little room with nothing to do 99% of the time. And I thought,
so
I don't get bored.
That's your don't throw me in the briar patch moment. I don't know if many listeners will get the allusion there, but I see what you mean.
Yeah, it was a job from, I think, 9 to 3. So normal hours. I was not having to work weekends and nights and holidays. I wasn't missing everything in my kids' lives. And I could write. I could sit in this little room and revise my novel. And I did. It was just the best job ever.
That is so cool. I have to ask, during the entire time that you were employed there, did anybody have an anaphylactic reaction ever?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
did
I
they
was
really?
in a bank. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you know what? They didn't have airway equipment.
Oh, my
I remember
God.
saying, I think we should have airway equipment. And they're like, well, I think there was some kind of, like, if you have it, everybody has to be able to use it and you aren't always there. And I was like, well, are you going to expect me to trick somebody with a pen? Like, this is terrible. But nobody had that degree of reaction. Still, there were times we were starting IVs and giving epi and that kind of thing. But most of the time I was just sitting there writing.
Good place for you to be.
Yeah. It was very serendipitous.
And so when did the magic actually happen from that point?
Well, if by magic you mean publication,
that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, that was super exciting. Let me tell you, there's probably no more exciting moment in my entire life than when I first got a literary agent, because I stunk at the process of trying to attract one. I mainly just repelled them. So I finally figured out how to do that. And my agent is the bomb. I love her. And she sold the book like right away to Penguin Random House. It took another 2 years to get published, and it was published in February of 2018. And then they offered me a contract to write more.
Wow. Home run.
Yeah. And they wanted medical fiction. I mean, it actually specified in my contract for the next 2 books that my protagonist had to be a doctor.
Well, that sounds like a very happy concatenation of circumstances, but that brings us up to the issue that I think is probably the most fascinating part of your entire story, because somewhere in the vicinity of the year 2020, you sat down to write a novel about a worldwide pandemic.
Yeah, I'm sorry I brought that upon us.
Well, now, we'll give us the timeline. Clearly, you actually started before the pandemic. You didn't live through COVID and wake up one day and say, well, you know what, I think I can make some money on this. But tell us your story. What was your life like at that point?
Well, I am laughing at the make some money part. But, I think the genesis of my third novel, it's called Doctors and Friends. And by the way, I did not pick the title. The publisher did. I had the idea for it in 2019, tossing ideas around with my editor at the publishing house. And I proposed a novel about somebody who worked at the CDC, an infectious disease specialist, and her particular area of specialty is kind of an obscure virus. And she's traveling with her friends from medical school, who coincidentally are in the other novels. They're not a series, but they're a bit like spinoffs. A major character in one becomes a minor character in the next, while somebody else is elevated to be the protagonist. And so these women are traveling during what turns out to be the onset of a brand new worldwide viral pandemic. And so I pitched it and researched it and drafted it and sold it to the publisher in 2019. It wasn't really finished. It's certainly what COVID had already started by the time I finished revisions on it. So we were able to incorporate little elements that were known in the early parts of 2020. So for instance, I subscribed to, I'm blanking on the name of it now, but some sort of email alert system for infectious diseases. So I was a subscriber to that system in late 2019. So I actually saw some of the very first alerts about COVID-19 come through that website. And
really?
At the time, and I actually paraphrased them and put them in the book. And at the time, they were very almost nonchalant about the threat level.
So you actually knew before we knew. Is that what you're telling me?
If I had been smarter, I would have known, but I just thought, oh, yeah.
I don't think it had anything to do with being smart.
Yeah. So it turned out to be ironic and terrible. I think if the book had been released during 2020, it would have done very well. It got amazing reviews. It got good publicity. It was on Good Morning America and People magazine and all these things. But by the time it actually came out, was 2021, and everyone had severe pandemic fatigue.
Of course.
So it wasn't hugely successful in terms of sales, but I think it's an interesting book. And I got to talk to a lot of great people. I crowdsourced this huge group of infectious disease doctors, epidemiologists, people at the CDC, the WHO, the NIH, some very famous people whom you have no doubt heard of, actually helped me out a little bit.
Whether it was intentional or unintentional, and I think the answer to that is obvious, it seems like the timing should have been very good for you. It never occurred to me that people might have gotten pandemic fatigue, but it sounds like a really fascinating premise, and frankly, I cannot wait to read it. I had mentioned to you earlier before we began recording that unfortunately, I have not had an opportunity to read the book because I only heard about you like a week ago. But what a fabulous premise it is. And, I want to congratulate you on having the idea. I hope it picks up steam. It sounds like you're telling me that it's not selling quite as well as you thought, but fortunately, these things, once they're out there, and I'm hoping things will pick up for you.
Yeah, you never know.
My impression was speaking to writers, and particularly novelists. Have you got the next one underway already, or at least the idea for it?
Yeah.
You going to give us some hints? I think it
becomes it's sort of an occupational hazard that you start, thinking in prose, and everything in your life becomes fodder when you're a novelist. I've written my fourth book, which hasn't found a publisher yet, and is not medical, actually. While I'm waiting on that one, my fifth one is about halfway done, and I haven't told anybody what it's about yet. If I told you, you'd be the first person to know. I'll give you a tiny hint about it. I almost would classify it in the young adult genre, YA, because the main characters are all high school students who then become college students, who then become medical students. And so I do go back a bit to the more medical nature in this book compared to the fourth one, the not yet published one. And they grow up in rural Kentucky. So I wanted to incorporate a little bit of my own childhood into this novel.
Sounds like a really good place to start a story.
Yeah. And so in any fiction, the crux of it is the characters have some sort of moral dilemma. You really want to amp up drama in a novel. It's like Alfred Hitchcock said that books and films are just ordinary life with all the boring bits cut out of them. And that's especially true in writing fiction. So my characters do face an excruciating moral choice, but I'm not going to say what it is yet.
Well, there certainly have been some rather excruciating choices from what I have read about these previous three books, and I'm looking forward. First of all, I'm looking forward to reading these three that we've just discussed, and certainly looking forward to the next one. It sounds like you have really found your spot, and I guess that's going to kind of bring us into what may turn out to be my final question, and that is, are you just deliriously happy with this new spot that you found, and do you hope to put out another 40 or 50 kind of John Grisham-like production of books of this sort? What's it going to be like for you?
That's a no to the 40 or 50 because I'm a very slow writer. I'm an overwriter, actually. I have to wind up cutting at least, double the amount of words that actually make it into the final draft of a book. But yes, I'm going to keep writing. And yes, I am really happy. I think, and this is something that I teach a narrative medicine class with an emergency medicine partner of mine to the medical students. And we talk quite a bit about this idea of what she calls physician hyphenates. And, I'm a physician novelist. She's a physician artist. Finding things in life that fulfill you and compel you and entertain you and pique your curiosity. Those are really important when we're, battling our way through what is often a very difficult career. So yeah, I'm really happy. I feel really fortunate that I had the opportunity to dive into this. I realize in a lot of ways it's a function of privilege because I had reached a point in my life where I could afford financially to become an author. We do not prioritize the arts in any kind of economic sense. So to become a writer, you have to have a financial cushion most of the time to make that work. And I did. And I have actually managed to make money at it, but it doesn't make you rich for the vast, vast, vast majority of authors. But yeah, I'm really happy and I love it.
Well, it seems like we've come to the very appropriate spot to give you an opportunity to speak to our audience on your own without any interruption from me. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you so much for the conversation today, Kimmery. It's been a lot of fun hearing your story. And at this point, I'm going to close my mic, and Dr. Kimmery Martin is going to share her personal prescriptions for success.
Thank you, Randall. First, I would like to say to everybody, thank you for listening. I know you have very limited time, but we alluded earlier in this podcast to the fact that I think most physicians and most people in medicine are curious people. And so I imagine you're probably listening to a podcast like this because you're curious about life and information and knowledge. And those are the things I think that really drive us in our careers as doctors. That, and also, as we talked about earlier, the opportunity to impact the lives of our patients and our colleagues and the public. So one of the things they asked me to touch on is from where or from whom did I find advice or inspiration? And I'll answer this question as it relates both to a medical career and to my secondary literary career. I reached out to everybody. I crowdsource. One of the truly great things about living in the era in which we do is that we have the ability to communicate with people that we don't necessarily ever meet in real life. And so in writing all my novels, I asked questions of specialists and mined people's expertise and crowdsourced and wound up making connections and friends virtually all over the globe. So I think if you have a particular interest, the opportunity to learn from people who are really good at that thing is there. You just take it. And I've found that most people are really willing to help you. Along those lines, I would say my particular advice, not just to writers, but to doctors, is to keep a journal. You think that you will remember all these incredible things you are living through, all the sweet moments and the desperately sad moments and the joy. And you will not remember half of what you think you will. So even if you don't intend to become a novelist, and I hope that everybody does, but if you don't, I would still suggest even jotting down a few words every night about something that happened during your day will be incredibly rewarding to read later on in your life. And then finally, thinking back on the things I would tell my younger self. It's really tempting to say nothing, right? Because, you know, we all go through the journey of life and our experience informs who we become, both positive and negative. But that also kind of implies that we've reached some kind of pinnacle and we're happy with where we are. And while I am happy with where I am, I'm not entirely happy with who I am. I think I could improve mightily. So there are things I would go back and change in my life. I would definitely tell myself 10 years ago to cherish the relationships that I have, especially with my parents, because I was about to lose one of them unexpectedly. And if I could go back to that time and just spend some more time with him, I would do it in a heartbeat. We get so busy in our careers and in our day-to-day lives that sometimes you lose track a little bit of connecting with people. So I'd work a little harder on my relationship with my family and with my closest friends. I'd also tell myself just to enjoy the ride. You know, I always tell my kids whenever they're anxious about an outcome or worried about something happening, I have them envision what the literal worst thing that could happen would be, kind of as a way of dealing with it if it does happen, but also as a way to point out that most of the time the worst thing doesn't happen. Now, working in emergency medicine, that would be a little bit different because the worst thing that could happen there was that you could unintentionally harm somebody. But aside from that, most of the time, the worst thing is not that bad in our lives. And so just enjoying even the ups and downs more, I think would be strong advice for me. And then finally, I would say to my younger self, I would try a little harder to identify and work on my bias toward other people. Right now, we're kind of in an era in which expertise is devalued, in which there's a lot of polarization. People are distressed about a lot of things. And I think really stopping to listen to what somebody else is saying is incredibly valuable. And I will leave you with that.
A lot of wisdom there. I love that. Make connections, be a journaler, enjoy the ride, and probably the wisest of all, listen to others. What a great idea. I bet every one of us could do a lot more of that. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. Kimmery, before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience where you can be found, where your books can be located, and reemphasize the title of the newest, or even all of them if you'd like to. So the floor is yours. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I am Kimmery Martin, Kimmery, and I don't think there are any other Kimmery Martins, so you can find me at kimmerymartin.com or on Instagram or on Substack. I write a monthly column there, sometimes about medical issues, sometimes about social issues, sometimes humor, parenting. You don't know what you're going to get if you sign up to be a subscriber of mine on Substack, but I hope you will. And I have 3 published novels so far. The first is called The Queen of Hearts. The second is The Antidote for Everything. And the third is Doctors and Friends.
Dr. Kimmery Martin, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and being on Prescriptions for Success today. It has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening with us today. If you enjoyed the show, you can help us reach more listeners by leaving a rating and a review, especially on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if your app doesn't have that option, just leave us an email or a voicemail through SpeakPipe at www.mymdcoaches.com/podcast. You can also help by becoming a Patreon member. That link is in the show notes, and we hope you'll also follow our companion podcast, Life-Changing Moments with Dr. Dale Waxman. Special thanks to our producer, Craig Clausen, our promotions manager, Mariana Rodabaugh, and to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.